Have you ever looked at someone you kissed goodnight 1,000 times, someone who knew the rhythm of your breathing in sleep, someone who held your children in their arms, and realized you never actually knew who they were? Not in the poetic sense. Not in the people change way. But in the way where their name isn't real, their past is hidden, their love was a performance, and your entire marriage was built on a version of them that never truly existed. What do you do when you wake up next to a stranger, 10 years into forever? Because I didn't leave my husband because of a fight. I didn't leave him because he cheated. I left him because I found out the man I built my life with didn't exist. And by the time I learned the truth, I had already lost myself. They say when a house is too quiet, it means one of two things, peace, or secrets. And for 11 years, our home had both. Or so I thought. We weren't dramatic. We didn't have explosive arguments. Eric wasn't cruel, or charming, or particularly memorable. He was steady, just steady enough to seem safe. He made his coffee every morning at 6 a.m., stirred it 4 times. He mowed the lawn every Sunday. He kissed me on the forehead before leaving the house, never the lips. He was a man of habits. But never a man of answers. I was a speech therapist. I taught children how to find their voice. And somehow, I lost mine, right there in my own marriage. I told myself we were tired. Busy. That the kids came first. That this was adulthood. That quiet meant content. But it wasn't quiet. It was hollow. I once caught myself staring at him from across the dinner table and thinking, if this man disappeared tomorrow, would I even know what I lost? And I hated myself for that thought. But later, I would learn I was asking the wrong question. Because he wasn't going to disappear. He was going to unravel, and take everything down with him. Eric's absence wasn't loud. It wasn't in his words. It wasn't in the way he yelled or slammed doors. It was in his silence. The absence that filled the space between us, the distance that felt like 1,000 miles, even when we were in the same room. I thought therapy was for people with real problems. But I was wrong. Because the worst thing was not the abuse I could point to. It was the emptiness. The silent erosion of trust. The way I'd started to believe I was the problem. Like I was too sensitive. Like I was too dramatic. It wasn't the first time he dismissed me. It wasn't the first time he told me my feelings didn't matter. But it was the first time I thought, maybe it really is me. Maybe I'm too much. Maybe I've been asking for things I don't deserve. It wasn't the yelling. It wasn't the cheating. It was the absence. The silence that filled every room we used to share. I wasn't even angry. I was just, lost. Lost in the man who couldn't even show up when I needed him. He didn't leave me. He didn't scream. He just stopped showing up. The unraveling didn't happen all at once. It started like a whisper. Quiet. Unassuming. Just small things, things too boring to sound dangerous. Until they were. It was tax season. The first year he brushed it off. Let's just file separately this time, easier for deductions, he said. I didn't question it. I trusted him with our finances. That was the deal. He handled the money. I handled everything else. The second year, he said he was sorting something with the accountant. No forms. No updates. Just vague reassurances and shrugged shoulders. But something inside me, something I'd stopped listening to years ago, twitched. Then the letter came. A pale, folded envelope from our mortgage provider. Overdue balance, 3 months behind. I remember standing in the kitchen holding it like it was radioactive. We had always paid on time. Always. I waited until the girls were asleep. Asked him about it gently, calmly. And he didn't even flinch. Oh. Must have been a processing error. I'll call them Monday. But he didn't. And by the following week, I noticed the joint savings account was gone from the banking app. Just vanished. Replaced by a new account. In his name only. When I asked him why, he looked me in the eye and said, "You never cared about that stuff before. Why start now?" I didn't have an answer. Because he was right, I hadn't. And maybe that's how he got away with it for so long. That night, I couldn't sleep. Not because I thought he was cheating, that wasn't it. It was deeper. It was stranger. It was the sense that I built a life with someone who had 100 locked drawers I never noticed before. His credit card statements had charges I didn't recognize. A small post office box rental, in another town. A hardware store, in cash. A donation to a non-profit that didn't exist when I looked it up. I told myself he must have reasons. That he would explain, that I just had to ask the right questions. But he didn't explain. He deflected. Got irritated. Dismissed me as paranoid. You know how bad you are with numbers, Lisa. Just let it go. That one stung. Because I teach children how to form words with broken mouths. But here I was, losing my ability to speak for myself. To trust my instincts. To recognize the man in my own house. It wasn't infidelity. It wasn't bruises. It wasn't shouting. It was something else. Lies, small enough to ignore, but sharp enough to bleed you dry. And once you start noticing them, you can't stop. Because the moment you doubt the truth, you start questioning everything. Even yourself. It started with an envelope I wasn't meant to open. He told me the bills were a mess, a system issue, a delay, a glitch. But when a new envelope arrived, the name printed on it wasn't his. It wasn't mine either. Just 6 letters on the label, Aaron D. Wilkins, our address. His handwriting, someone else's name. At first, I thought maybe it was a mistake. A neighbor. A delivery error. But something in my chest tightened. And didn't let go. I placed it on the dining table, right where he'd see it when he got home. But he didn't ask. He walked right past it. Twice. Didn't flinch. Didn't hesitate. Just sat down, ate dinner, and scrolled through his phone like nothing was wrong. I waited until he went upstairs. Then I opened it. Inside was a small packet of documents, nothing dramatic. Legal stuff. But the name was there again. Aaron D. Wilkins. And a line near the top of the form read. Legal settlement correspondence, personal use only. I stared at it like it was written in a language I used to know. And then I did something I hadn't done in years, I Googled him. Not Eric Dawson. Not my husband. But that name on the envelope. And there he was. I expected to find nothing. A dead end. A coincidence. Instead, I found a mugshot. His face. Younger. Thinner. Colder. But unmistakably him. The article was from 2004. He'd been charged with financial fraud, misappropriation of client funds during his time at a small investment firm. He took a plea. Avoided jail. Paid restitution. And then, disappeared. Except he didn't disappear. He became someone else. Eric Dawson. The man I married 5 years later. The man who told me he was private because he had a rough past. The man who said he wanted a clean slate. The man who promised me stability. Suddenly the missing money made sense. The separate bank accounts. The years of filing taxes alone. The lies dressed up as details you don't need to worry about. My life didn't collapse in one night. It had been collapsing for years. Quietly. Gently. Without noise. Until that moment. That night I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even move. I just sat there, with my hands folded on the table like a guest in someone else's home. Because that's exactly what I was. I wasn't his wife. I was just another chapter in the story he was rewriting. And in that silence, I realized something terrifying. The man who slept beside me had lived an entire life before me. One I never knew. One he never intended me to find. He came home just after 6. The same way he always did, coat on the chair, phone on the counter, shoes lined up at the door like nothing had changed. But everything had changed. I had printed the article. Left it face up on the kitchen table beside the opened envelope. No drama. No words. Just truth, cold and visible. He walked in, looked at the papers. And blinked. Once. No gasp. No outburst. Just a long pause. Then he picked them up, read them over slowly, sat down, and said, "I wondered when you'd find that." Like I had stumbled onto a forgotten password instead of the life he had hidden. I asked him, "Who is Aaron Wilkins?" He looked up and said, "Aaron was a mistake. I had to become someone new." And then he said the words I'll never forget. "You wouldn't have married the real me." There it was. Not a confession. A calculation. He said I was being dramatic. That I was digging into things that didn't matter anymore. That we had a family now. That this, our life, our kids, our home, this was what was real. But how do you trust a life when you don't know the man inside it? Every memory twisted. Every conversation tainted. Every, "I love you," retroactively soaked in silence. He told me his fraud case was minor. That he paid it off. That he never hurt anyone. But I had read the letters. The victim statements. People lost their savings. A woman had to delay her son's surgery. And I realized then, he didn't feel guilty. He felt inconvenienced. I didn't yell. There was nothing left to shout. He had already built a wall I couldn't climb. A second life I wasn't part of. So I stood up. And walked upstairs. Not to cry. Not to scream into a pillow. But to pack. He didn't beg. He didn't stop me. He just watched. Maybe because he knew there was nothing left to save. Or maybe because he never expected me to leave. Maybe he thought I'd forgive. That I'd swallow it. Like I'd done so many times before, the silence, the coldness, the questions. But this wasn't silence. This was deception. Premeditated. Packaged. And sold as love. I didn't leave him because of who he used to be. I left because he never gave me the chance to choose. And love without truth isn't love at all. I didn't make a scene. There was no dramatic exit. No public accusation. Just a quiet trip to the courthouse with papers clutched in shaking hands. I filed the divorce myself. No lawyer. No argument. Just a signature. A final act of reclaiming something he never asked permission to take, my reality. Eric didn't fight it. No pleas. No counters. He simply said, "If this is what you need." That was his final performance. His curtain call. I thought the storm was over. But when lies rot in silence long enough, they spread. A week after filing, I got a letter from the IRS. Unpaid taxes. 4 years' worth. Filed under my name. I stared at the numbers, thinking there had to be a mistake. Except there wasn't. He'd listed me on paperwork for a business I didn't even know he still ran, in a different state. And then came the credit cards. Cards I never applied for. Debt I never spent. Calls from collectors I didn't know existed. All under my name. All tied to a billing address I didn't recognize. I was too stunned to cry. Because grief had given way to something colder, clarity. I tried to shield the girls. Told them only what I had to. But the truth has a way of finding its way out. One night, my youngest, 14 at the time, was looking for an old charger in his nightstand. She found a phone. Not his regular one. Older. Burned around the edges. Locked with a passcode. And that's when I knew. This wasn't just about a man with a changed name. This was about a man still running. The messages weren't from women. They were from names. Transaction codes. Bank logins. Strings of numbers connected to prepaid cards and ghost accounts. Withdrawals under aliases. One message even said, "All clear." Sent to her account. Her account. My account. Without my knowledge. He wasn't hiding a lover. He was hiding a system. I had been living with a man who spent a decade rebuilding his identity. But the cracks never sealed. He didn't reinvent himself. He just changed the name on the paperwork and picked a quieter place to disappear into. And he brought us with him. Without our consent. Without our protection. I thought I was divorcing a husband. Turns out. I was escaping a criminal. The police couldn't do much. The fraud was messy. Gray area. Years old. Technically, we were married. Technically, I was listed. He had covered himself legally, just enough. Morally. He was bankrupt long before I filed. And maybe that's what hurt most. That I didn't see it. That I let love blind me. That I raised 2 daughters to believe marriage was supposed to look like this, quiet desperation covered in Sunday smiles. What Eric took from me wasn't just money. It wasn't trust. It was time. Time I'll never get back. Years spent loving someone who was never real. Building a life with someone who was always in costume. But costumes fall. And when they do, you're left staring at the stranger beneath them, and the wreckage they left behind. I used to think therapy was for people who'd survived car crashes. Or childhood trauma. Or panic attacks in the middle of crowded rooms. I never thought it was for people like me. A woman who cooked dinner every night. Who showed up to work on time. Who paid her bills. Who didn't break, just faded. But after the divorce, I couldn't feel anything. Not anger. Not relief, not even sadness. Just numbness. Like I was watching my life from across the room. So I walked into a therapist's office and sat down. And for the first 10 minutes, I said nothing. Just stared at the carpet and tried not to unravel. When I finally spoke, I didn't talk about the fraud. Or the lies. Or the stolen money. I asked one question. How did I not know? Because that's what kept me awake at night. Not what he did. But that he did it under my nose. For years. And I didn't see it. People think abuse always looks like violence. Like yelling. Like threats. But Eric never raised his voice. He never slammed a door. Never cursed at me. Never called me names. He didn't have to. He silenced me in smaller ways. A sigh when I asked a question. A blank stare when I voiced concern. That quiet tension that made me feel like I was always doing too much, or not enough. He made me doubt my instincts. He didn't argue, he made me feel silly for even asking. That's what psychological abuse looks like. It's a slow burn. A steady erosion of self. Until one day, you forget what your voice even sounded like before it started shaking. My friends tried to help. But they didn't know how to. They said things like, "You're so smart. How could you not see it? You always seemed happy. Why didn't you say something?" And the worst one. Maybe he was just trying to protect you. No. He wasn't protecting me. He was protecting his story. And I was just a character he cast to keep the plot moving forward. I wasn't angry at my friends. I was angry at myself, for making excuses. For mistaking control for care. For confusing calm with safety. Because people like Eric, they don't create chaos. They create silence. And in that silence, they build an empire of lies. And you live inside it, like a beautifully furnished prison. Healing doesn't look like forgiveness. It looks like learning how to speak again. Not to him. But to yourself. They say healing isn't linear. And they're right. Some days, I woke up ready to conquer the world. Other days, I couldn't even decide what cereal to buy without hearing his voice in my head saying, "That's a waste of money." But slowly, the volume of that voice faded. And mine. It came back louder. I started with one small decision. I changed my name. Not just on paper. Everywhere. On emails. On my voicemail. Even the little label on my mailbox. I let go of Dawson. I reclaimed Lisa. Then I tackled the next thing I feared most, my finances. I sat down with a financial advisor, a woman, this time. I showed her everything, the debt, the damage, the trauma. And she didn't flinch. She said, "Let's clean this up. Together." For the first time, I didn't feel ashamed. I felt supported. And I paid off the smallest debt first. Then the next. And the next. Every cleared balance felt like removing a stone from my chest. The girls noticed the change in me too. I smiled more. Laughed without guilt. Listened without the background noise of fear. I started teaching my oldest how to drive. We laughed until we cried when she almost hit the mailbox. For the first time, our home didn't echo with quiet resentment. It echoed with life. But it wasn't just about personal healing. I kept thinking about other women. The ones who were still stuck where I had been. Women silenced not by violence, but by control. By manipulation that left no bruises, just scars no one could see. So I started something. At first, it was just a Facebook group. Then it became a support circle in the community center basement. Now, it's a growing sisterhood of women, telling their stories out loud for the first time. We sit in a circle. We don't offer pity. We offer truth. We don't say, "Just leave." We say, "We know. We see you. And you're not alone." One night, I wrote an op-ed. Anonymous. But every word was mine. It was called, "The Man I Divorced Wasn't Who I Thought He Was." I talked about charm. About control. About the lies we're taught to overlook in the name of stability. I didn't name him. I didn't need to. I named the pattern. I named the pain. And I named the possibility of becoming whole again. I don't tell this story for sympathy. Or revenge. I don't care who he's with now. I don't want him punished. Because my glow-up didn't come from destroying him. It came from rebuilding me. Piece by piece. Day by day. Brick by honest, hard-earned brick. I didn't just walk away. I rebuilt myself from the ruins. And this version of me? She's not scared of the silence anymore. She knows who she is. And this time, no one else gets to rewrite her story. There was a time I believed love could fix anything. If I just tried harder. Listened more. Loved better. He would open up. Be honest. Come back. But I've learned something I wish I didn't have to learn the hard way. Love isn't enough. Because love without truth is just emotional debt. And I was paying interest on someone else's lies. He wore kindness like a costume. Chose silence over honesty. Control over vulnerability. But my peace? It's not a performance. It's not built on a version of me that stayed quiet, agreeable, small. It's built on knowing that I am allowed to ask questions. Allowed to want answers. Allowed to choose myself, even if it means letting go of forever. Maybe you're watching this and wondering, could this happen to me? Or maybe, it already has. Maybe you've stayed in a relationship that made you feel alone. Not because you were weak, but because you believed in who they pretended to be. I want to say something to you, clearly, without pity. You are not stupid. You are not broken. You are not to blame. You were targeted. Manipulated. Silenced. And you survived. You deserve peace. Even if it costs you the comfort of a familiar lie. You deserve love. But not the kind that hides behind omissions. You deserve safety. The kind that starts from within. So now I ask you. What would you do if you discovered your partner's entire identity was fake? Have you ever stayed silent in a relationship that made you feel invisible? Would you leave, or would you convince yourself one more time that this is what love is supposed to feel like? Tell your story below. Someone might need it more than you think.